Hello guys, you are welcome to part 3 of our scooter model, and in this part we're going to model in the seat and the scooter handle. Now let's proceed. We can drag this window this way, select our scooter and say tap for edit mode, and we can rotate our screen this way. We can say 2 for edge selection. We're going to select this edge here first, and we're going to hold control and select this edge also. So now we can select in that line. So we'll say E to extrude, right click to release, and let's push on the extrude on the X axis. Say E to extrude again, right click to release, and let's push this edge, closing it together. So we have something looking like this now, which is pretty cool. So we can come here also, but first let's unhide our subdivision surface. So we can hold Alt and select one of these edges here and say F to fill this up, to fill those space up. You can say 1 for vector selection. So what I'm going to do next is that I'm going to cut, add some loop cuts here, joining these vectors to these vertices. So I'll say K to add a cut. I'm going to left click on this point here and drag my mouse to this point and left click and say enter. So I'll just adjust this way. So I'll say K again to add a cut. I'm going to select this and cut here and say enter. I can move this to this point here so I can see properly. I will say K to add a cut, select that vectors there to the center here and say enter on my keyboard. I'll say K to cut, enter, K to cut tool. I'll say enter. So I have something looking like this. And say G twice to move these vertices upwards. Select these two vertices and click G twice to move them upwards, so we don't have any stretching. So I have only these two vertices to work on. So let's try to add some few loop cuts here. Let's say Ctrl arrow to add two loop cuts there. And we can say K to select this, join this to this, and say K, select this and join this to this. So now we can toggle on our shade smooth and see how it looks like. So we've solved that for now. So we're going to go back again by toggle on that subdivision surface. So we will use this point now to create the seater. So it's very simple. We'll say tab again for edit mode, 3 for face selection. We are going to select all these faces here. We're going to say C on our keyboard, C on our keyboard to select faces. So we can select all these faces. Hold shift to deselect all these faces. And say C again on our keyboard to select all, to circle select, and let's select to this point. To hold shift to deselect point we don't want. You can check around. We'll select that now. We're going to say shift D to duplicate, and we're going to right click to release and say P on our keyboard to separate, and we're going to click on selection. So if you go to tab again, so we can now select this face that we've separated single-handed and say tab for edit mode, and say 1 for vector selection, so we can work on just only this tab. And we can say 2 for edge selection, so we can select these two loop cuts that we added here, hold shift to select these two loop cuts and say delete on our keyboard, and let's go to dissolve and say dissolve edges. So we can dissolve those two edges now, and we still have this other face here. What I'm going to do next is very simple. I say A to select all. So I want to remove some edges. I think this is okay now. So what I'm going to do now is very simple. I'm going to go to my modifiers panel here and go to add modifiers again. And this time I'm going to add what we call solidify modifier. So we're going to add that. I'm going to come to the modifiers panel here, solidify modifiers panel, and increase the thickness to minus 0.31. I think this is okay. So we can easily play along this, but I want to keep this simple. I think this is okay for that now, or I can reduce it a little bit. Okay, this is okay now, minus 0.13, or let's make it 0.21, and we say tab for object mode, and we're going to apply this modifier now. So if we apply that now, we can say tab again back to edit mode. So we can come and select all these faces here. Trying to follow our reference. Hold shift to select all these faces. And we can now say E to extrude them. Like this. So we can go back to our right view and say Alt Z and say 1 for edge selection. But let's do Ctrl Z back. I think we have to select to this point also. So we can hold shift again and select all these faces, and let's go to our right view and say E to extrude and Alt Z for wireframe, 1 for vector selection, and now we can start shaping our seat following our reference. So let's ensure that we are always following our reference at all times. Ctrl R to add a loop cut here. Ctrl R to just add one loop cut here to give us that curve that we desire. We can bring this down here now. So we can decide to push this. Alt Z. So we can select this and push inwards. Ctrl R to add a loop cut and try to adjust this to fit. Ctrl R to add just one loop cut here. Let's try to seal this up. Select these two vertices. Push downwards. So Alt Z for wireframe. So we have this part now to extrude. So we can come back now and make some adjustments also. So we can select all these vertices. Hold shift to select. And let's push this upwards just to give us that pop-up back. just something looking like this. This is okay. We can select these vertices also and just try to push this way. So just try to make some few adjustments, just shape things. So just ensure to shape things always at all times, and we can just shape all these. So just have some feel. Just push these vertices forward a little bit and just push this forward a little bit. What we're going to do now is very simple. So we're going to work on this other side of our scooter. Say C to select all, 3 for face selection, C to select that circle, and let's select all these vertices here. Hold shift and select this, go to right view. We are good to go now. And just say Ctrl arrow to add just one loop cut here. 3 for face selection, hold C to select. You can hold shift to select this and say 3 for right view and say E to extrude this point. 1 for vector selection, Alt Z. Now we can start shaping this. Following our references. See what we have here now. So Alt Z again. So just ensure to follow your reference at all times. Don't give up. Push this forward. Bring this forward. Ctrl R to add a loop cut there. You can just push this to this point. We have something looking like this now. You can say tab now for edit mode to see how our seat looks like. You can say slash to hide on our keyboard so we can work on it properly. So we can select all these. You can say C to select all these vertices here. And right click to release that, and let's push this forward a little bit. As you say 3 for vector selection, 1 for vector selection. Select all these vectors, is hold shift to select, and 3 for right view, or Z, 3 for right view, and let's push this forward like this. So you can say Alt Z again to just confirm our loop is correct. Alt Z and say, now let's activate this and say tab. You can say slash. Now if we hide our overlays, we can see how our scooter looks like. So we're going to do one more thing now, and this is our seat. But first, we can turn on our overlay back, our wireframe, and we're going to select this and say slash to hide. And if you can see now, we have a kind of a sharp line here, and I know what the problem is. So we'll go to our mirror, because this has been mirrored already. So we can come here and say we can unhide our mirror in real time and say tab. So we have this here. We can unhide that too, and say 3 for face selection. So I'm going to delete this inner face here. I'm going to select this and hold Control and select this. You select this also, hold Control to select that, and say select this also, and say delete on my keyboard. I'll delete those faces. Also select this face, and say delete face. To select this face, hold Control, select this face, and say delete face for that to be smooth. So I have something looking like this alone. So I'm going to now check this back and say clip. So when I come to my subdivision surface, it's now looking very smooth, and that sharp line is no longer there again. I'm going to turn this off first. I'm going to say slash to unhide every other object, and 3 for my right orthographic view. I'm going to turn on this shade smooth and make some few adjustments. So I can also add some loop cuts here. Control arrow to add loop cuts. Add 2 loop cuts there to ensure that edge comes out very well. So you can also add some few loop cuts back here. Control arrow to add 2 loop cuts here, and Control arrow to add 2 loop cuts here also. So if I turn off my overlays, go to my geometry, turn off my geometry, we have our scooter seats looking like this. You can see tab to edit mode, 1 for edge selection. So we're going to turn on our proportional editing now, and we're going to push some vertices inwards. Select these vertices, and let's just push this inwards a little bit, just to ensure this is sitting inside. Okay, I think this is okay now. Do this for this other region. Just want to push this inside inwards a little bit, and select this and push outwards. I don't want it to be too outwards. push this outwards. We can select this and make this levels of 2. Also add some sharpness to that. We can select this also and let's turn on shade smooth so we can see it properly. And we can add a level of 2 to this also. We have our scooter looking okay. So now we can come back to our right view and now we can create this handle here. So we're going to open these windows now so you can see properly. So I can select all these and hide them, and select this and hide it, so I can model my handles separately. But first, let me check this back. So we just need to just model just this head here. We can unhide this first. So to add an object, Shift A to add an object, go to mesh and let's add a plane. We are going to rotate the plane on the x-axis, arrow x 90 to rotate the plane, S to scale. We're going to move upward on the z-axis. We're going to move the plane on the y-axis and our right orthographic view. We will say, so we can turn on our wireframe, which is turned on already, and we can say S to scale or Z for wireframe mode. We're going to push this to this point, tab for edit mode, and select all these vectors here and bring downward. So let's turn off our motion editing first. So Ctrl R to add a loop cut here. And we can push this upwards. So I'm going to say A to select all, arrow to rotate. I can push this to this point because my reference is not looking alright, but I can either choose the front or the left. So I'll do Ctrl Z back and I'll say 2 for edge selection. Select this edge here and push slightly backwards. And I'll say E to extrude on my right view and also come to my front view and make that adjustment like this. I can say 1 for vector selection. So I think this starts from here also, so I can push this forward and try to just follow my reference also, always at all times. Try and ensure to follow your reference at all times. 2 for edge selection. Select this and say E to extrude, and I can say S to scale. Come to my right view and push this forward. Okay, I think it's okay like this. Or Z. But so I made a mistake. I will say 3 step for my face selection. I'll select this face and I'll say delete on my keyboard. Delete that face and I'll go to add modifier and say mirror, so I can mirror that. I'm going to cage this and clip this so I have the other face working on that face also. Alt Z wireframe, so I can adjust this vertices also, push this downwards. I have something looking like this now. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to come to my right view and say Alt Z and say A to select all, arrow to rotate, so I can say 2 for edge selection. I can move this to this point and arrow to rotate this to this point. 1 for vector selection, and let's try to shape this. following my reference. Control arrow to add a loop cut here, push to this point, control arrow to add another loop cut, control arrow to add just 3 loop cuts, and select this and push forward a little bit. I can select this also and say arrow to rotate. Now I can select all this and say S to scale and arrow to rotate. Just trying to make it very simple. Or Z and say 2 for edge selection. Select that edge there and say E to extrude. Right click to release and push to seal that. Go back to my right view also and leave it that way first. So I can hold Alt and select all this and say F to fill and say 1 for vector selection, K to cut. I'm going to cut this to this point and cut this to this point and say enter. So where I have 1 2 3, which is not okay, I want to make that face false. I'm going to add just 1 loop cut here, control arrow to add 1 loop cut here, so I have this a complete face here. So 1 for vector selection back. So I'm going to seal this now. I'm going to say 2 for edge selection, hold Alt and select all this loop here and say F. We can't fill that, so I'm going to select this first and say E to extrude, right click to release. I'm going to push close together. I can hold Alt and select one of this edge here and say F to fill. I'm going to do the same thing for what I did here. I can say 1 for vector selection, say K to add a cut, select that vectors, cut at this point and say enter. K again, select that vectors here and we can cut at this point and say enter. You have something now looking like this, which is okay now, and we can say control arrow to add a loop cut here. And let's go to our right view and see what we have. Or Z for our front view also. So we want to make some extrusion here. So we can say 3 for face selection and select this face. I say S and X to separate that. Say control arrow to just add 1 loop cut here. I say G twice to move it forward. I say 3 for face selection, select this face. Say 3 for right orthographic view and say E to extrude, but let's do Ctrl Z back and let's say Ctrl Z and say Ctrl arrow to add just 1 loop cut here. Now we can say 3 for face selection. Let's select this face and say E to extrude, arrow to rotate. Can push this backwards, 1 for vector selection, and we can shape this to this point. Say Alt Z, so we have something looking like this. Can say face selection again and can extrude 1 more time. E to extrude just once. Just looking like that. So we have our head of our scooter here, so we can turn on our wireframe. So now if we unhide every other object, so let's see how this model looks like in the front view and the right view. So we have something looking like this. So we can select this and push downwards and see how we can make some further adjustments. You can select this also and click slash on our keyboard to hide. You can turn off the subdivision surface and say tap for edit mode, 2 for edge selection, hold alt and select this edge and say F to fill. And now we can start cutting. You can say K on our keyboard, select this point to this side and say enter on your keyboard. Say K, select this to this and say enter. So now we have so we're going to join these vertices. Say K again and see how we can make this 1 2 3 4 and join this to this and say K to cut and say enter on your keyboard. Let's try to just fill this up and say K to cut and fill it up there. So we can say Ctrl R to add just one loop cut here. You can say K and say K to join this to this point. So we have that settled. Now we can work on just here and here. You can say K and I'm going to join this to this and say enter. So we have 1 2 3 4. So this is complete. So now we can turn on this. We have this looking smooth already. Well, let's just check our vertices and ensure tab and okay, you have to join this. Select this and select this and say M at center. Now we can toggle that and see what we have. So just ensure that the vertices are together. You're not having any mistakes. So you can say Ctrl R to add a loop cut here. You can say tab. You can say Ctrl R to add just one loop cut here also. You can say K and say enter. You can say K and join this to this. Select this and say M. Say at center. So we have that fixed up. Now if we turn on our wireframe, we have something looking like this, which is okay. And you can say slash to unhide every other object. So as we proceed, we'll make some further adjustments also. You can select this and say tab. And now let's go to add one modifier called subdivision surface modifier. You can say tab and say shade smooth. And we have this now looking like this. Say tab again. You can hold alt and select this and say S to scale. But first let's scale this. So we can scale this edge and say Ctrl B to bevel that. Just add one loop cut and say tab. So we have this looking like that, which is nice. So we can play around this now and let's shape this. But first, let's see this first. Say tab, and we can select this, hold alt, select this, and say F to fill, slash to hide. You can say K on our keyboard, so we can join these areas. Say K again, we join this to the center, and K, we join this to the center and say enter. K, join this to this and say enter. Now we can say shade smooth, and say Ctrl arrow just to tighten that up. And say tab. So we have this looking smooth, and say tab again and say Ctrl arrow to add just one loop cut here, just to tighten that up. So we can add several details to this. Add one loop cut here. We have this looking, so we can select this and make it subdivision levels of 2, just to add some smoothness and sharpness. You can say slash to unhide that. So we have this now, and let's shift this and let's just make some few adjustments. Select this and say tab. For edit mode, turn on proportional editing, and let's just push this inwards. Let's push this inwards. And just push this inwards also, and select this, push this inwards, just push that inwards also. Select all this, push inwards, think we over push this, or you can push this a little bit outward. So if you scroll your mouse, you can increase the proportional editing and reduce it also. Say Ctrl arrow to add just one loop cut here. So I can push this, can hold alt, select all this, Ctrl arrow to add just one loop cut here. Say tab. So I can say G to grab and push upwards. Three for free selection, G to grab. Just ensure it's covering that point. Just try to make some few adjustments. Just try to select this and push this forward. So we're just trying to make some few adjustments and to ensure this is nice and okay. So now we can now create the handle for the scooter and the side mirrors, which is very simple. So we can bring this to this point. You can see 3 for right view. Let's come to our front view now and say Shift A. Let's go to mesh and let's bring in a cylinder. So we're going to come to this add cylinder here and let's just make this 20. You can even make it 18. See. So you can select this and say S to scale. We say arrow on our keyboard to rotate X and 90. No, arrow Y 90 and S to scale. I'm going to push to this point, bring it to this point here. We can come to our front view and move this to this point. Say Alt Z. We say S to scale again. So I can move this to just see the size, and that is okay. And say S and X to scale on the X axis. I say tab for edit mode, Alt Z, and select all this and say Ctrl B to bevel, and just add some few loop cuts there. Do the same here, Ctrl B to bevel. This is okay. Alt Z and say tab. Alt Z. So I have something looking like this for the handle. Say tab now, and I can say Ctrl arrow to add loop cuts. I say tab now and say Ctrl 2 on my keyboard for subdivision level of 2, and right click and say shades mode. So I have my handle looking like this. Change this also and say 3. Can also reduce my proportional editing. Push that outwards a little bit. It's okay now. I'm going to select this and say Shift D to duplicate. Right click to release. Right click again and say mirror and say X global. I'm going to push this sideways. Alt Z. Push to this point. So I have 2 handles now. So we're getting there gradually. So I'm going to create the what we call the side mirrors. So still the same process, Shift A. So this time around we can decide to bring in a mesh or a cube. So let's bring in a cube. Say S to scale the cube. Push the cube upwards. S to scale. Move the cube to this point. I say S and Y. Scale on the Y axis. Looking like this. Say Alt Z for wireframe mode. Tab for edit mode. Ctrl arrow to add loop cuts. 1 loop cut and add 1 loop cut here. 1 for vector selection. And we can shape this looking like this. So we can say Ctrl arrow just to add 1 loop cut here. Arrow to add just 1 loop cut here also. Can just make some few adjustments. Hold Alt and say G twice to move this, and Ctrl arrow add just one loop cut here. Let's push these vertices downwards. So we have something looking like this. And say Alt Z, say tab. So let's see what we've created. We can see it here also. A tab and say A to select all, S and Y to scale that. So we have our side mirror here. And say tab, and we can say go to top view and say Alt Z. You can select all this and try to push this forward. Select all this, push this a little bit forward, and push this forward, just looking like a C shape, which is okay. And say A to select all again, S and Y to make it smaller. You can hold Alt, select this, hold Shift and Alt, and select this edge here and push this forward. What I'm going to do next, we're going to come to and say 3 for right view also. Say A to select all. And push this, and we can say arrow to rotate and Y, arrow and Z to rotate on the Z axis. Arrow and Z a little bit. So this is okay. So this is our front view now. So we're going to just add one cylinder here and say Shift A, go to mesh and add a cylinder. Let's say S to scale that cylinder. Let's just push upwards, S to scale. You can say S to scale uniformly, and you can say arrow to rotate like this. Let's just scale one more time, S to scale. Tap for edit mode, Alt Z. So we can come make this right view, 3 for right view. We can push this to this point. You can select all this here. You can hold Control and right click on this point. Right click on this point. You can right click on this point. Right click on this point. Now let's do Alt Z. Maybe this one is Alt Z, and let's ensure we are selecting all this. Okay, that's good. The Alt Z, you can hold Control and right click on this point and right click inside. So right click here and you can right click inside also. And this, I think this did not extrude properly as I thought. Oh, I made a mistake to extrude the. So I was supposed to use 3 for face selection. That was a mistake. I'm going to do that again. Hold Control and right click to this point. So we can select this face down here and hold Control and right click. Hold Control, right click to this point and right click inside the head and say Alt Z. Say tab. So I have something now looking like this. You can select this and say arrow to rotate rotate on the Z axis. We can say tab to rotate and say A to select, so we can rotate in our edit mode, and say arrow to rotate inwards. We can just push. Also say arrow and X to rotate on the Z axis, arrow and Z to rotate on the Z axis. Say S to scale uniformly. Push this inwards, this point. Okay, I want this handle to be inside, so I can say S, scale a little bit. So I'll select this and say Ctrl 2, subdivision surface of 2, right click and say shade smooth. Select this, right click and say shade smooth, and say S to scale. I want that to be very small, and say tab. So this is my front view. I can say 1 for vector selection, or Z, toggle on my wireframe. So I can just make small adjustments and push this inside. Just make small adjustments and hold Alt, select this ring and just make that adjustment. For Z, say tab. So I can now push, say tab for edit mode. Just push these points here. Just try to align this to just fit inside. Toggle on my wireframe. I have something looking like this now. If you've done this, you can select this and say slash for edit mode, and say tab 3 for face selection. You can insert this face, I to insert, I to insert. Do the same here. Select this face, I to insert, and I to insert, and say tab, add modifier, add a subdivision surface modifier, and say tab, Ctrl arrow, add a loop cut, push upwards, Ctrl arrow, add one loop cut down and push downwards, and say slash to unhide every other object. So we're going to select this and select this and say Ctrl J to join. But instead of joining, because we're going to texture this later on, okay, I can still join this. Say Ctrl J to join. For it to be one element, if I select this, they are just one element now. Ctrl Z. So I'm going to come here now and say Shift D to duplicate, right click to release, right click again and go to mirror and say X global. So now we've mirrored this to this point, and we can now push this to this point. So now we have two mirrors here, which is okay now. I can push this first and let me work on this alone. So I'm just need to ensure this is not floating. I'm going to select this, push downwards a little bit, ensure it's inside. It's okay this way. So I have my two mirrors here. And select this and push it a bit backwards. This is okay now. So we've come to the end of part 3 of our scooter model. So in part 4 we're going to be modeling the headlamps the light and the exhaust and the box. So thanks for watching. Please kindly like my page, share the link, comment and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks very much.